In module 11I, find my remote control. In module 11I, what we want to be able to do is review our standardized work from previous modules, okay? Because we can use certain worksheets to help us do some what-if analysis. The work balance sheet is probably the most effective, but you can also use the standardized work chart in the diagram side where there's the grid, or the operation work standard sheet where there's the diagram piece. And you can actually do scale models of a layout and test different things and test the different measurements right there on just a sheet of paper. So with work balance, well, the most valuable thing is just being able to identify those steps that are required for this job. And when you're solving this particular problem, and here the problem clearly is our cycle times are exceeding the takt times. We got too much total process time, too much cycle time for B and C, and that's a problem. We want to solve those. So we'll go and look at this stuff, and we'll pull out some waste, and we can actually reduce that. Notice everything is below the takt time now, so we should be good, right? Well, we got a whole lot of slack there now. We've reduced the total process time from 155 to 102. Now we ought to be able to do this with 4 folks, right? Based on the takt time of 30 seconds, 102 seconds, we ought to be able to do all this work, all 6 of these process steps with 4 people. How do we do that? Well, we start stacking things up using this Yamazumi board. It might go this way, but when you're doing this, it's wide open. You just kind of do, what if we do this here? And what if we do that here? The thing you have to be mindful of is that order of precedence. There are some things that have to happen before others. So that's the value of the precedence chart up there, the Gantt or the PERT chart. Play around with these things, and when you settle on what the layout's going to be, then you can get into planning and implementing. Okay. So you can use the Yamazumi board, you can use the standardized worksheet, just the graph, or you can use any kind of graph. Make little cutouts of what you're going to move around. If you're moving furniture around someplace, make some cutouts. One of the greatest examples of this was in the movie Our Founder. It's about Ray Kroc and McDonald's. And he said the McDonald's brothers, when they were trying to redesign their kitchen, they went out to a local tennis court and took the neck down and took chalk out, and they took all their employees out there and they said, here's the oven, and here's the fryer, and here's the milkshake machine, and here's the sink, and here's the mops, and here's where everything goes. And they laid it all out on that tennis court and then walked it and rehearsed it and tried it and tried it and tried it until they dropped the cycle time and dropped the cycle time and dropped the cycle time. So there's no limit to the creativity you can bring to analyzing these different countermeasures. And once you've evaluated it and settled on the one you're going to do, then we got to plan and implement. So now we're going to bring out our project management skills. And it really doesn't have to be all that difficult. I mean, I've got this on the C4A3 worksheet. It's built right in, right under the decision matrix that says, here are the implementation steps. Where did they come from? Remember when we were defining each one of the countermeasures, we had to say, here's the title and the description. Here are the key action steps. Those key action steps go here. Only now you assign somebody responsibility and you set some dates for when they're supposed to be complete. You might have reviews periodically, but here's one company, they used it to do this. 3 simple steps. Are you going to get them done or not? And it gives you something to track right there. You put this on the wall, everybody sees what's going on. A lot of people like this format. I've seen a lot of this kind of format on different A3s over the years. And you can see they've got their countermeasures on the left, numbers 1 through 6, and then they've got different steps within that. And they've got a who's responsible for that and a due date. And then the black dot, that is just a quick indicator status. Okay, this happened to be at the end of the project, so all of the action items were complete, but they divide that circle into 4 quadrants, and when they're finished with the first quarter of it, they color it in, then the second, so you can get a quick glance to see whether or not you're on track for your implementation plan. Another example is this one where this particular person incorporated the results after they put the countermeasure in place, here's the result they gained. Pretty powerful statement when you want to show people the impact you can have by helping solve a problem. This is a great way to do it. Does make the typing a little bit small. Here's your basic Gantt chart for all these different action steps that are required. In this case, notice just when you spend a little time looking at these countermeasures, you'll see that these are really countermeasure steps for maybe one or two different countermeasures. The way we've defined those, if they're not mutually exclusive ways to solve the problem, it's one countermeasure. We're trying to implement the one countermeasure. So a bunch of different steps. And now, again, status here, who's responsible, and then I like the Gantt chart kind of look going out. This is when we're planning to have it done. That's what a plan is all about. Here's one that looks like it came right out of a Microsoft project. This was the first of 3 pages for this particular plan. Now, these were big strategic level problems that people were working on over the course of a year, and they might have several different tactical level problems as they've broken the big strategic problem down. So some of these have a lot more action steps than I expect to see from you. Once we get the plan implemented, really before we can start collecting data to determine whether that thing works, we've got to be able to teach everybody this new process. And let's face it, if you have made any adjustments by doing all that analysis and all that what if stuff, you've changed something, and therefore you've got to create new standardized work and use that to teach everybody else. Okay, and the key things are the operation work standard chart. And you remember this example from previous modules. Okay, and this example, here are the key steps. Here's how we do them. Here's some reference. Here's knack points. And you put it out where people can see it. To supplement that, we're going to have the job breakdown sheet. And we use the job breakdown sheet, which has the major steps and the key points and the reasons why. And in this case, they've even added that 4th column for safety. Some add a training aid column. Whatever works for you is what you want to do, but it's got to have the major steps, the key points, and the reasons why, because this, with the diagrams on the operation work standard sheet, together form your instruction sheet. This is how we teach somebody how to do this job. So after you've done that work balance, you say, here's the new sequence of steps. Transfer those to this job breakdown sheet, then explain what those key points are of each of those major steps, explain why they're important to do it in that order, anything else you want to add on that, and then draw the diagram for it and everything else so everybody can see and practice. And then practice, and then practice, so that we can get better at this stuff. So let's review this whole countermeasure module. This is a big module, a lot of stuff, a lot of content, and there's more coming because we're going to talk about the flow ideals coming up next. So we hit the 6 countermeasure steps, and let me see if I can remember them off the top of my head. We have containment, which is preventing the spread of the problem to other areas. We have evaluation factors. So we want to determine our evaluation factors. We want to formulate countermeasures. We want to evaluate countermeasures. We want to plan the implementation, and then we want to plan, and then we want to implement. So containing, we talked about it. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about that because if we go upstream, we can prevent all of that from happening with some self and successor checks and some gauges and some smart design of the work with quality in mind, so we can detect a defect before it goes anywhere. Selecting the evaluation factors, and the important thing here is we're trying to eliminate bias in the evaluation. It is very easy for us as humans to really want to advocate for our own ideas. And if it's my idea for the countermeasure, I want to make sure that it gets selected. And so if we don't lock in the evaluation factors and the weights, then it's easy to manipulate those, and we don't get a true unbiased evaluation. We get somebody's pet project. Then we want to formulate the countermeasures. Remember, the countermeasure, you have to have an accurate description of the countermeasure. So give us a good title and an accurate description of what it is. What are those key action steps to actually implement? And then we want to evaluate it against those critical evaluation factors. Typically, we want to go to 5 ways at least. Okay, if we're going to go 5 whys, give me 5 separate, mutually exclusive, independent, different ways to solve this problem, not 5 different steps. You'll see in those examples that I showed you for the plan things, a lot of those are just countermeasure steps. That's if you see some of these evaluations, they have 52 different steps they're trying to evaluate them, and they got to do them all. It's just crazy. But I also spent a little bit of time talking about building creativity. And as a skill in the workplace, this is pretty critical. Everybody is creative. We've been talked out of it for our whole lives. We've been taught to comply. So now it's up to us as leaders in these lean organizations to bring that creativity back out of people. We got to do that by creating this fear-free work environment that people feel safe in sharing their ideas. Then we want to evaluate those countermeasures. We talked about individually evaluating the countermeasures against the countermeasure evaluation factors. So we have a score for each one, doing the experiments and doing the test and doing the trials, whatever it takes to get the data you need to make a good decision. And then we put them in that decision matrix to be able to look at all of them against each other, using that individual data to populate the decision matrix, and then normalizing those raw scores so that we get scores from 1 to 5 that we can then multiply by our assigned weight from way back in the second step where we where we selected those evaluation factors, and then do the math, run the normalized score times the weight, and then give us a sum. Whichever one gets the highest score, that's your first recommendation. Now, something to keep in mind. If you are not the decision maker, don't get upset if the decision maker says, I want to do something else. So you've gone to all this trouble saying, here's the evaluation factors, here's the weight for those evaluation factors, here's our 5 different options, here's how they scored out in the test, here's what we recommend doing. The decision maker still has the prerogative to do something else. So if you really want to be the hero, if you really want to cover your ground, if you really want to make an impact on your organization, when you go in to present this to that decision maker, you'll have that simple approach. You'll have that, here's the analysis we did. Here's the root cause. We got these 5 root causes we developed. We selected this as the first priority. Here are the 5 countermeasures we considered. We tested them here. Here's the performance data, all in the decision matrix. Here's how the numbers worked out based on our evaluation factors that we agreed were important for the company. This is why we recommend this particular countermeasure. Now, if you go in with that kind of ammunition, 99 times out of 100, the decision maker is going to see it and agree with it and run with it. But you might get that other person. And this is why it's important in the definition of the countermeasures to give us that description, give us the key action steps, because when that decision maker says, I don't want to do countermeasure 4, I want to do countermeasure 2, you can say, we have the plan for that right here. Here's our key action steps. We're going to assign people, we're going to assign dates, and you look like $1 million because you're ready. Finally, we want to plan and implement using standardized work. We want to do more planning for standardized work. That's actually more in the evaluation piece of all the different countermeasures. Back in formulating and building creativity and evaluating those countermeasures and trying all the what if things, we're going to use the work balance chart, standardized work chart, or operations work standard chart. But to actually execute on the one countermeasure you've selected to implement, you've got to build that plan and lay it out on that graph so everybody knows, here are the steps, here's what's going to happen, here's what's coming up, here's how it's going to affect you. Record those results if you like after you implement it, but make the plan publicly available, and then implement when you have that date to implement. Stay on it until all those key action steps are complete. I can't tell you how many organizations I've been in with just hundreds of half-solved problems all around. So if you have any questions, post them in the discussion board, send me an email, in-mail me on Carmen, whatever it takes, whatever you want to do to communicate with me. Hell, book a call with me. All right. Let's talk about these things. I want to make sure you're comfortable with this. And again, a lot of material, came pretty fast, lots to consider.